There's a very strong idealistic thread runs through Irish republicanism, and this new generation, the younger generation, I think have sort of grown up on the back of all of this that's been going on. So I suspect that's more the driving force.
Now, the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has been raised from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. The move, based on MI5 intelligence assessments, follows a rise in dissident Republican activity, including a recent gun attack on a top police officer. Well, Major General Tim Cross is a former British Army officer who deployed on operations in Iraq, the Middle East and in Northern Ireland. And we can speak to him now. Good evening to you, Major General.
Good evening, Carol.
What do you make of this decision to raise the terrorism threat level?
Well, we've got to remember that the threat level had been at severe for well over a decade, I think I'm right in saying, until it was reduced last year to substantial. There are 5 levels for the folks listening. There are 5 levels of these threat levels. The lowest is low. The top is critical when an attack is imminent, and severe is second. So they lowered it to substantial last year. And what's happened, of course, is the new IRA. One of the things about Northern Ireland is you have to understand how many of these splinter groups there are. There used to be, back in the good old days, in inverted commas, just the IRA and the provisional IRA. Then there was the continuity IRA, the real IRA, and all sorts of others. The new IRA have emerged. There were a couple of attacks last year. One in November, there was a bomb attack on a police patrol car. And there was then the February roadside attack bomb in Strabane. And then, of course, as I think you just said, there was the attack on the policeman, John Caldwell. So the new IRA have just ramped up the activity level. So I think rightly, MI5 has said, OK, we've got to go back to where we were for the previous decade.
Yes, Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell is still seriously ill in hospital after that attack. But senior police officers there in Northern Ireland are making it clear that they think that this threat relates mainly to the police themselves. Deputy Chief Constable Mark Hamilton is saying that the dissident Republicans are focusing on attacking police officers, not the public.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's a funny old place, Northern Ireland, if that's the right expression. I mean, I served there in the 70s doing bomb disposal work and worked closely alongside the police. And in those days, we had, well, at the height of it, for Operation Motorman, we had something like 27,000 British soldiers in Northern Ireland. There are much fewer than that now. But the main people dealing with this are the police. The police have primacy again, and therefore they are the main target. And therefore, from their point of view, what Severe does by raising this threat level again, there are various processes and procedures that just automatically kick in. The threat level is seen to be higher, therefore you have to take more caution. You have to do certain drills to make sure you're looking after yourself and your families and so on. So I would agree with that. I think the police are the targets. There was a time. I mean, we had families living in Northern Ireland while we were there back in the 70s and 80s, and they were never really under threat. It wasn't a truce by any manner of means, but there were certain agreements. But I'm afraid the police have always been at the front line of this. They're incredibly brave. I mean, when I was there, I did a year over there doing ammunition work and bomb disposal and so forth. But we had, there were policemen who have lived through this for decades, and there were people who came back from their normal daily work who then put on uniform to patrol the streets in the evening. The ladies were called Greenfinches, and then there was the Ulster Defence Regiment and the police and so on. These are incredibly brave people who've lived under extraordinary stress for decades. So this is, it's not a good thing from their point of view that this level has gone up, but it is a harsh reality, and they are used to dealing with it, so that they will just follow the process.
What do you think is driving this increase in activity by dissident Republican groups? Is the political vacuum, the fact that we have not had the devolved institutions up and running for over a year now? Do you think that is a factor in this?
I suspect it's a factor, but if I'm honest, I don't think it's probably the driving factor. I mean, we've got a new generation. One of the problems with these situations, frankly, all over the world in many cases, is you get a new generation coming through. There's a very strong idealistic thread runs through Irish republicanism, and this new generation, the younger generation, I think have sort of grown up on the back of all of this that's been going on. So I suspect that's more the driving force. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it is an issue, and I personally would want to see Stormont back up and running again. I think it's been long overdue. Leave aside all the politics of Brexit and so forth. I understand that, but I think from a Northern Ireland point of view, they do need a working Stormont. So it would
And
help. Undoubtedly, it would help. And
and
I think the other thing to
okay, let
say
me
is,
just ask you, sorry, because we're running out
yeah,
of time.
sure.
The US President Joe Biden
Yeah,
is
yeah, Joe
due
Biden's visit. Yeah.
to visit very shortly. Um, do you think it's surprising still that he's making that trip, given this latest warning?
On balance, I don't. I would say no. I mean, unlike the decision for the king not to visit France as a result of what's going on there, these issues are always looked at, continuously, and the threat assessments and the intelligence world assessing them and advising and so on. At the moment, I'm not surprised that he's still going to go. If the threat changes, I'm sure they will reassess it. But I understand why he's going, and I think he's right to go, and I think it's right that it continues to be the case.
Major General Tim Cross, former British Army officer, really good to speak to you. Thanks so much for joining us.